Hello, I'm Ahni Bonner, and welcome to Somatic Expeditions, a summit of opportunities to journey through the body into expanded awareness, connect with what's alive, and create new possibilities. In this session, I'm speaking with Nicole Kleemann. For 13 years, Nicole lived the dream, leading teams around the world for a multinational tech company, until one day she woke up burned out. And if that wouldn't be enough, let's throw a hernia disc on top of it. So she was not only rendered aimless, but motionless and somewhat speechless. She had to relearn to say yes to herself first. And creativity and movement taught her how to do that, how to connect with herself and others, how to let go of attachment, old beliefs and stories, and open her heart to new possibilities without shame or guilt. Nicole is on a mission to support women to know and trust their head, heart, and body, to transform limiting beliefs and create choices that will bring their lives and careers to new heights. Her international experience managing diverse teams at Google, along with her innate understanding of human behavior and motivation, has made her a sought-after manager and coach throughout her career. She is the creator and teacher of corporate and public workshops, The Wisdom of Saying No, Yes, Honor Yourself First, Well-Being at Work, Emotional Well-Being in Uncertain Times, and Uniquely You. Nicole, welcome to Somatic Expeditions.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you and the audience.
So, what are you able to tell us about your professional life and the journey you've taken? How did you become the leader you are?
Wow, you start really at the ground. I actually think I had incredible leaders, and in particular female leaders in my life, that have just shown very strong convictions, very big ways on moving through life. I always and often talk about my grandmother, actually, who by the end of the war, they luckily had a farm. They needed to rebuild the house or parts of the house. And she kind of exchanged butter for bricks and all these things. But she had tremendous distances to kind of do that with. So she needed to bike maybe 30 miles to get there for a bit of brick and a bit of butter. And these stories, I think, formed me. These stories always told me that you can do it, and no matter if you're men or women or whatever, right, you can do it. And I think that's something that really formed me throughout my life, and that's, I think it started very early.
Mm-hmm. So then there was some path that took you into positions of where there were very few women at the top.
Yes, as well. So I never, it's not true, and it did not never just see it that way, but for a long time I actually didn't see it that way. I didn't necessarily consider the gender piece so much in my career. I just showed up, I wanted to do something, I did it. I sometimes didn't ask questions. I just did. And I think I was therefore often perceived as a leader. I also had the luck that I might have been a bit older than others because I have a bit of a crooked CV, right? So I started working first, and then I studied, and then I went into the international career. So I was a bit older than the others, had a bit more other experiences already, and therefore I just had more confidence in a way that the things I was doing were right, or good, or would be working because I'd seen them before. And I very quickly actually became a leader in the organization. And it started with easy things like setting up workflows for all the new hires, telling them what to do, when, and how to do it. I became a somewhat unofficial trainer very early on, in how to be with customers and all these kind of things, because that was my area of expertise before then. Yeah, and then from there it went. And then moving around the world actually showed me at some point, oh, by now I'm at a point where I'm actually the most senior female and there's nobody above me that is a woman, right? In these kind of positions. That is a bit of a cultural thing, and that is a bit of it just happened that way. It was not intentionally by the company, but it really just happened that way. But that for me, for the very first time, showed me, wait a moment, I actually need to do things different. And I need to adjust to a masculine leadership style in a way that I hadn't necessarily needed to do before. And I think in a way, sometimes I went too far off my own kind of personality, my own track, to emulate this kind of way of being. And I do think it had contributed to the burnout at the end of the day.
Can you say more about that?
How should I put this? When I got into the burnout, I didn't so when I got the diagnosis of burnout, I actually got the diagnosis of depression because burnout was not an official diagnosis that was insurance compatible, right? And it's true, I had a depression. But what I didn't understand is why, I was kind of questioning, why me? I'm not a sad person in particular. I'm actually a go-getter. That was my personality. That was my my thing, right? And then I was suddenly this person who was kind of introverted, closed off. I didn't recognize myself. I remember somebody called me Natasha, and I said, oh, that might be this other person. Right. And what I realized in this process is that I became really detached from my own inner core and inner wisdom. I didn't trust my gut anymore that much. I lost my confidence along the way. I lost even the knowledge that I got through experience, and I didn't trust that anymore. This idea, I wouldn't necessarily say I had an imposter syndrome, but this idea of an imposter syndrome suddenly became very tangible. I suddenly started to understand that. And one way of looking at that, and one way of maybe explaining that, is that I wasn't me in my full capacity, in my kind of leadership style. And one of my biggest goals is now to really reach out to women and say, you actually can have your own leadership style, because it worked for a very, very long time. And I do think it works actually much better when you stay true to yourself, instead of trying to follow, let's say, a public definition or cultural definition of success, and really create your own definition and your own idea. What does that mean for me? What is really important to me? And I had to relearn that and understand that. I had to relearn what is really important to me. Why do I do the things that I'm doing? What do I want to bring to the world, right? Why am I here is the big question, right? I know all this. And that's kind of how I look at this experience, that I became somebody, or thought I had to be somebody that I wasn't really, in order to kind of move ahead. And I followed a career path that at the bottom of my heart I knew was not really mine, but it was the cultural successful career path, right? So people I remember when I said I will quit Google in this case, they said, how can you quit such an amazing company? And I said, yes, it's all true. It's an amazing company, but it's not my path, right? It's not what I need to do. And so I needed to let go of these kind of beliefs.
So you were in a place where you had lost kind of your feeling burnout, feeling physically ill too, the hernia and everything. And I think a lot of people feel this when they're pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing against outside of their core values. But how did you begin to pick yourself up? Because sometimes it's the hardest when you feel like you're at rock bottom. How do you climb out of that? What are the first steps?
Good question. And really hard to pinpoint sometimes. I do not want to say that my way is the way to do it, but I do have some kind of a belief that sometimes, and I do not really want everybody to hit rock bottom first, but in my case, I had to hit rock bottom. in order to kind of get out of it. And I remember a conversation that I had, which I would consider, actually, it was not one moment, it was several moments in a row. But one very particular one is I traveled to Germany, met my family around my birthday, somewhere in July 2015. And I saw one of my oldest friends, and I came through her door and she said, "What's going on with you? Something is off, right?" And I remember saying to her something along the lines of, "Nicole equals work, there is nothing else left," because I didn't have any other identity anymore. I didn't recognize what I said in that moment immediately. I actually recognized it a couple of months later when I said something similar again. I was then at lunch at Google with my friends and colleagues, and I started telling them I wanted to go on a 3-week silent retreat. And if you know me, you know that's not the place I should go. Right? So, and they looked at me and said, "Nicole, have you considered maybe going and getting a medical leave?" And I was flabbergasted, right? I said, "What, me? Why?" I'm still functioning. Why should I get a medical leave? However, I listened and I went to the doctor, and I remember walking in and immediately I started crying, which is a bit of a difficult thing for me and a bit of a very weird moment. And that moment I felt probably the most shame I've ever felt in my life, and the most guilt, because I broke down and I didn't know why and what was happening. But it was really emotional, which in a way told me I was at the end of my rope. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I actually, what I didn't say, but I actually cried more or less for a couple of months every morning when I drove down to work, but I hadn't told anybody. So, and that was the moment where I suddenly finally need to tell what was going on. And the doctor then said, "So for how long has this been going on?" And for me, in my case, there is a particular trigger moment when something happened. And I said, "For roughly 6 months." And he said, "Okay, all the questions you asked, and then the last question is, are you suicidal?" And I said, "No, but I'm really at the end of my rope. I can't do it anymore." And then he actually helped me to understand that I needed to reach out further. So what happens, and I think the way to get out of this is actually through the support of other people. One thing I had to learn is to trust that other people are absolutely willing to help me. Not because I asked or so, they are actually, sometimes it's like they are waiting on the sidelines and want to help you. They see you struggling, but they can't do anything until you say something or until you initiate that. So I think the best way to get out of this is realizing and understanding and doing this initial step where I say, okay, I just trust that something will change. So, and then I called the Employee Assist program, again, a bit of luck. She luckily said, "I will find a therapist for you," because what I asked for was, can I get a therapist and can I get a couple of weeks off, please? Right. And she found that, and that was a blessing in disguise, because when you have a burnout or a depression, it is really, really hard to do the most easiest thing that you normally are capable. It's really hard to pick up the phone and call a doctor and say, "I need an appointment." And often you call, and I had to call a new doctor, and often they tell you, "We do not take any more patients," right? And you can't hear that no. So I was really, really blessed, I think, that there were so many people at the right time doing many, many things for me, and that I trusted that finally, first time in my life, probably. Yeah.
I remember something you wrote was about you started getting into some somatic practices too, and I just remember this beautiful writing you did about when you started dancing, and it was a twirling dancing, and just how that transformed your connection to other people too.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little?
Yes. That's actually another kind of brilliant moment that I didn't understand immediately, right? Some things come afterwards, but I remember kind of when I was in my coaching training, I saw people, there was an element in this training, in this school, that after lunch we would come back and everybody would dance for 15 minutes. And that was completely foreign to me. and I saw some people moving in the most elaborate way. And I said, whoa, what are they doing here? So, and then they were talking about 5 rhythms and soul motion and many of these practices that I've never heard about, conscious movement and dance. And I thought, what is going on here? So I started getting very curious, and I found, luckily, an incredible teacher. And I remember calling and saying, I've never danced like this or in any way or shape or form. I had a herniated disc earlier on, so I'm not completely movable right now. Can I come to your 1 week long workshop? And she said, up to you, but maybe you want to come to 1 hour first. But I immediately signed up for the 1 week workshop. It's the way I function. And I arrived there, and I remember something else first before I did the twirling. I had a lot of movements that were like this. And it's kind of, I need freaking space, which I didn't understand immediately. But then the twirling happened, and the way I twirled through the room first was very aggressive, not like a child twirls with a lot of fun, very aggressive, very, very fast, with a lot of anger, with a lot of emotion. And I didn't see the people anymore. Although they were, when I was stopped, I saw them standing there and waiting for me. They cleared all the space, right? Which is incredible when you observe this afterwards. And then I did actually, after this 1 week workshop, I actually did sign up for a whole year process where we kind of met 4 times for 10 days. And that's when I observed how my twirling changed. When I started twirling through the room with other people, really seeing them getting much softer, getting much lighter, getting much more childlike, and more joyful in this twirl. And I really love twirling. It's one of my favorite things. When I'm at the beach, I do twirl into the water. But it was such a stark contrast to what the kind of rigidness, stiffness, and anger that I had and felt, and this, how I pushed people away and couldn't stand contact and connection at the beginning. And then suddenly understood, wow, they are waiting for me. They are actually there around and holding my space, creating safety, being there in connection with me. And then you start dancing. A dance is always a partnership in a way, right? Sometimes with yourself and the air around you, but most of the time it's a relational thing. And that's what I understood through the somatic practices. And that's one of my favorite things about somatic practices, actually any kind of somatic practices at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you do a lot of different things too. And I understand now that you have been taking this all back into the organizations and institutional context to show that great leadership. I mean, you've talked about the process as a lot of organizations might think that it's procrastination or distraction, but these are actually the things that de-rigidify the creative process and allow teams to open up and leaders to lead better. Can you talk about what you bring to organizations now?
I will show you a bit when we do the drawing piece that I asked you to do with me, but one of the things that I realized is when you are in an organization, let's say in a traditional organization, you focus a lot on your mind, right? It's a lot about metrics. It's a lot about getting to the goal. It's a lot about how to change a mindset. Whenever you go into management or leadership training, it's mindset change, it's habit change, it's these kind of things. And yes, there are great tips and great things in there, but what I've realized and what I've seen very often for myself as well, I've done every management training under the sun, right? You kind of internalize this for a moment and you remember this for a second, and you might do great the next week. But when you're really into, let's say, a difficult situation where you need to communicate differently, you forgot all that. Your mindset is still back into your inner critic. You still do not say no because you fear that you are not getting a promotion, or you fear that you might lose your job, or you fear that you might not, that you're not a team player. There's all these things that show up still, right? Even though you've learned in your training that's not the case, right? And one way that I personally experience for myself and now bring to corporate and actually everybody who kind of approaches me is how to include your body and how to include your emotions actually into work. Because one of the other things that's often particular for women, for men too, but they do not hear that sentence that often, is, oh, you're so emotional, or you're so moody, or you're so whatever, right? And it's kind of considered a very, very bad thing. But without emotions, without these soft skills, we do not connect. We do not have our team trusting us. We are not robots, right? We are human beings, and we need a human touch. And the teams that strive best is that are psychologically safe and that trust other people. And one way to do that is really, when I say bring your full self to work, I do not mean tell every single story of your life. I mean really be aware of who you are in your body, in your heart, and in your head, and bring that forward and show that to your people, and they will immediately trust you and connect with you on very many and different levels.
Do you have any stories of about those kinds of transformations that people have seen when they were able to do that?
I give you one of my favorite, actually, my favorite recent feedback when I worked with a leader in an organization. When I asked her, so what would be your testimonial for our work together, right? She said, I stopped believing my own lies. And that for me is really my favorite sentence. Because it really showed that she is not just trusting her mind anymore. She's now encompassing and incorporating her body and her emotion. She acknowledged that there's an emotion that tells her I'm not at the right place. She actually quit her job and started her own business. That was the result of that, right? And others, another favorite moment of mine is very early in the wisdom of saying no training, is I ask them, when they're in a situation where they want to say no, but don't because they have all these fears and all these thoughts in their head, how that manifests in their body. If they have a bodily sensation, every single person can name at least one. It's kind of the clenching in your stomach, it's the short breath, it's the choking, it's the heat wave, it's whatever it may be, right? And that's what they start realizing. And the moment they start realizing that, they actually change and pay attention to that. That's my ask of them, to pay attention to these things and then move them around.
Well, we live in a cultural mythology that kind of says, just get to work and say yes, 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 I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. But you talk about how when you are able to follow the wisdom of saying no, that it's actually good for the organization. And sometimes
Yes.
lots of positive things can emerge from that that would have never happened had you not said no.
There's a cost of not saying no, and a real kind of corporate cost. So one of the questions that I actually sometimes with cheek and tongue get from corporates when they consider hiring me is, but why should a manager want a team that says no? And my answer to that is, if you are a manager and your team is never saying no to you, you will actually run into deep trouble. They show you immediately that they do not trust you, because when your team trusts you, they are capable of saying no to something that you suggest. And you want them to say no to something that you suggest because you hired them for their expertise, right? You hired them for particular skills. They have very different job descriptions, and they have very different skills that are not your skills. You are hired for a very different job, and you're doing a very different job than somebody in your team. So that's one thing. That's a very good indicator that your team is not functioning. So the other thing is, because your team is not functioning, you will actually lose people. And that means you need to hire people. And hiring, even if you have tons of money like big corporates often have, hiring is really time consuming and really expensive. So you easily spend $100,000 if you need to hire a new person because you are not capable of managing your team properly, just by the process itself, just by the training period you have, and by losing the other person that have been working together very well. So, and on a personal level, when you do not say no, what happens, and that's actually what also happened to me. I'm not having these kind of problems myself, right? But usually my kind of story was, I'm very capable of saying no. And suddenly in this kind of burnout situation, I wasn't. for various reasons. And I often talk about many of these reasons, but to cut the story short is I didn't say no anymore. And I had suddenly 20 things on my plate. And when you have 20 things on your plate that do not belong there, some will slip. And what you also do not do in this moment is you communicate properly that these things are slipping. You hope, oh, I hope nobody will see them. But they see them. They will be acknowledged at some point. And the trust and the reliability and all the things you have created and built up for the last 10, 15 years, they are suddenly questioned because you let this one thing drop where you thought, or maybe nobody will see it. And your whole kind of relationship, everything you've worked for is actually going down the drain, because rebuilding that trust and that reliability and a work relationship you've had before is actually really, really expensive. And that's something you need to understand, I think, when you try to kind of navigate out of the no. And we don't do this consciously, but we do this unconsciously, and we hope for the best. And most of the time, it doesn't pay out in the long run.
I wonder what great leadership and creating independent thinkers that can say no and be trusted as in their expertise, taking more accountability, doing what they do with passion, how that would transform organizations and even what their bottom line might be or the work they might do in the world if they built an environment with that kind of leadership, with that kind of internalized leadership. Almost, it seems like everybody becomes a leader in the organization.
Personally, I think everybody should. And I recently read a short note or an article that this idea everybody should or could be a leader is misleading, and maybe there's some truth to that. However, I do believe that because not everybody wants to lead, and by lead I mean leading a team or leading other people, and that's fine. That's not what leadership is about all the time. That's sometimes just managing people, right? And that's a difference. But for me, leadership really starts with you leading your life the way you want, right? And acknowledging that you have certain needs, have certain desires, have certain dreams, have certain responsibilities towards yourself, towards your family, towards your friends, whatever that may be. And understanding that that's where leadership really starts for me, is with you. When you are in a company or in any kind of relationship, because being at work is a relationship at the end of the day, or multiple relationships, right? When you are at work or in life and you do not know what you want and who you are, it's really hard for other people to grasp you, and it's really hard for other people to trust you and know what you want, because you say something this day and you say something else the other day, because there is no clear line. And one thing that human beings really like, even if they do not agree with your decision, right, but they like that you made one, right? That's what is there, and and that in a weird way builds more trust and more connection. So I think when you have this self-leadership, you know yourself better, you know what is important to you, you will go after your own goals, and that's a good thing. Actually, it's not always a bad thing when you have your own mind, right? And I actually think we have this idea it might be easier when people just follow blindly a leader, but at the end of the day, if I've experienced teams as a leader that just follow you blindly, and it's exhausting. It's really, really hard work. And it's a lot of pressure, because you suddenly think every single decision you need to make needs to be perfect and needs to be right, and you need to consider so many things. But when you can be with your team and your team contributes to that ultimate goal that you have, and each has their role to play in this, and their autonomy and their expertise in there, you actually bring this burden, right, or this work to other people, and it's a much easier way of leading teams, much easier.
It seems like a much easier way to get to work that's relevant for the world too, and that the world needs, and is sort of more of a natural marketplace of ideas and exchanges and energies and goods and products.
At least in my opinion.
Well, so would you be able to tell us more about your specific work that you
Yeah.
do with people and help them develop leadership?
I would actually like to introduce you to some of my core principles or foundations. That's where you get the piece of paper and the marker out.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go right into
um,
practice.
and everybody who is seeing this and listening, I actually encourage you to get a piece of paper and a marker or a pen out. It doesn't really matter. And we do not do artwork here. We do a doodle here, right? But it's I think there is, and I will tell you during the process, there's a bit of a benefit in actually doodling on your piece of paper while talking to me. Because the core principles of my work, and you already mentioned this in the introduction, is I really believe that the more we can align our head, heart, and body, and the more we incorporate not just our thinking mind, but really our gut and our instinct and our feelings, the more we actually can create change, right, for ourselves and for others, and understand ourselves better. And that's actually something that I would like to show you in this doodling process. And the very first thing I show you a bit of, I hope you can see this. This is actually only what you probably need to do. And if yours looks very, very different, that's fine too. The important piece is that you doodle along the way, because what it helps, any kind of creative outlet, if it's writing in your journal or if it's doodling while we talk, can help you with, let's say, emotional overwhelm. It also creates a visual reminder of what we talked about. And doodling has been shown or has been proven to help you remember 30% more of what we are talking about. So there are many, many benefits of taking notes or doodle when you're in this process. And one of the things I think we do is going through this. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I have lots of markers and my piece of paper.
So the very first thing I actually want you to do is outline a triangle on your paper. And make it as big as you can, and stay within this triangle and just trace this while I tell you a bit about why the triangle is such a beautiful reminder and such a beautiful symbol to help us think about these things. So one of the things I say, everything comes in a triangle. And it reminds you of that there are three things to think about when you are under stress or when you need to make a decision, and three things you can take your wisdom from. It's your head, heart, and your body. That's kind of what the corners of the triangle symbolize. But the other thing that I actually like for this particular understanding is imagine that the triangle is also a pyramid or a tent or a tipi or a roof, some kind of sanctuary you're creating for yourself, right? And the way I like to imagine this is that there's this light cake shining on you in this triangle, right? It's kind of filled with light and warmth and making it really cozy and comfortable for you, because that at the end of the day is your space, your sanctuary, your comfort space. And that's why I think we start with the triangle. What I would like to know from you is, while you're drawing this at the moment, how does this feel to what's coming up for you when you think about the triangle?
It feels like it has a very stable, I mean, mine's an equilateral triangle, so it's very stable base. And when you turn it any direction, it's got equal sides. So, well, it's not quite equal, but it looks like a triangle from any direction. Like it has a base, I can turn it. Base, like all three are important,
Yeah.
like equally.
Yeah. And I think that's another very good point, right, that you're making there. All three of them are, all these corners or all these things are equally important, and they actually support each other. So they are not isolated, they are not in different spheres, right? So that's why I really like to start with this.
Yeah.
The reason why I choose the infinity symbol for the base of the body is because it fits nicely into the leg position when you put a figure in the triangle. But the other thing that I really like, when I talk about the body, I do not just talk about the physical body and what we feel, but when you do this kind of infinity symbol for the legs and the first part of the body in this triangle, I want you to imagine that it represents the infinity of your body, right? Your body is not just your physical presence. It's the way you connect to the world. It's the space that is around you. It's the way your feet touch the ground, right? With these kind of touch and sensation you have, you explore and experience the world. And there's a lot of information in that. And when you kind of be with your body and want to tap into your body's wisdom, you can, the way you currently trace the lines of this infinity symbol, you actually can trace with your mind's eye through your body, right? You can do the tracing in your body and think, and maybe ask yourself the question, where do I feel tension, right? Or where does my body need some gentle caressing? Or how and where do I want to be held, right? What is my body really wanting right now? Maybe I want to move. Maybe I want to kind of stretch. Maybe I want to get rid of the tension in my shoulders, right? So all these things, we're not asking why right now. We are just observing what is the information that our body actually has. And very often, the first thing we notice is where the tension is held, where we feel discomfort. And the second part is how can we soothe ourselves? What is our body telling us about this? So that's why I really like to have this and the infinity symbol using to understand that it's not just the physical body, but also how you can use a blanket to support you, how you can use nature to support you, how you can put your feet into the ground. So there's way more to that than just what meets the eye. And when you're okay with this, actually tell me what you think when you do this, or what comes up for you when you do this.
I've just been tracing it and noticing how, there's the infinity symbol, and there's like no point on the infinity symbol is more important than the other. So it's not about the destination. And so wherever you are, you just are kind of there. But it also corresponds, it seems like, with the breath and the movement from the inhale to the exhale, because it's sort of flipping. And so the ends of the inhale that become the exhale, and the exhale that becomes the inhale. So when you're talking about parts of the body, it's like I feel like as I'm just doodling it, I'm bringing my breath into awareness, just the up and down and the shift, like that they're all one thing.
Yes.
The intake of oxygen and the exchange, it connects me to the internally to the external oxygen in the air, to giving off carbon dioxide, but also just letting it feels like it's looping in anywhere I direct my attention in my body.
Yeah. It's a beautiful way of describing it. I haven't even thought about that one. That's why I like to do these things in tandem. There's always something that I learn as well.
Yeah, I like it as the legs too. Like in the figure, it's the legs, so that it's so grounding.
Yeah.
And now my triangle does have like a direction in a way, and the triangle has become kind of an arrow that goes upward. Like,
Yeah. And that's the other thing that is beautiful about a triangle in general, because it also can be seen as a direction sign, right? It's for the arrowhead or for direction. And it's always dynamic. And it's always kind of, while it is very stable, it indicates some kind of growth or movement as well. Already there's some kind of energy moving upwards or into one of these corners, depending on how you look at it, right? So that's the beauty of it. And the next piece that I actually like is to really focus on the other center of our wisdom is our heart. And that's why I made this so very prominent, because we often push our emotions aside, right? We got so much, how should I say this? We get so much, we have so much learned to not use and trust our emotions, right? We believe that sadness and anger and fear are negative. That's what you hear all the time, right? We've heard that our outbursts, our anger outbursts, or our crying is a negative thing, is a bad thing. And I really want to change that. Because when we look at emotions, I sometimes actually even say, emotions is our first and our most important wisdom center. And the reason why I'm saying this is because emotions actually trigger our body to react and our brain to do the thinking. Sometimes it actually shuts down the thinking. But it is most important for us to understand really that emotions are elemental for us, that emotions are not negative. Emotions are there to first and foremost inform us. Second, to protect us, particularly when we talk about fear and anger and disgust and these kind of things. And that's something we need to acknowledge. The other one, when we talk about joy or excitement, that's actually the emotions that connect us to the world and to other people. So every single emotion we have is valid. And that's really, really important to understand. And also the other thing that is really important to understand is that emotions do not want to be stuck with us. So we often believe that when we are sad forever. But the same way we are not happy forever, we are also not sad forever. And emotions kind of, at the most, want to stay in our body for 90 seconds. But when they stay in our body for 90 seconds, they really have to tell us something. Otherwise, they would just move through. Like a thought moves through like anything. And that's the idea of the heart. And that's the idea why I like when you trace it for a while, right? Just stay in this flow. That's the way emotions want to flow through your body.
Could I see the picture again of the heart?
Yes, you can. This is how I did it. You can do it any way you want, right? Your heart can be much bigger. Even your infinity symbol can go out of the triangle. The triangle is just there to kind of create a safe space for you at the moment, right? And your container in a way. But one of the things that I think is beautiful when you're in this space and when you're in contact with emotions is first and foremost to ask with curiosity and wonder, like a child probably would ask, is what is this emotion? What does this emotion's need? What does it want to tell me? What is the information it has? And I love to talk about anger because I would consider myself an anger person. First and foremost, it's one of my strongest emotions that I know and can name. But anger is also a very tricky emotion because anger covers up fear and anger also covers up helplessness. And anger always tells you there is a threat to you, whatever that might be, right? It can be a perceived threat, it can be an actual one, it doesn't really matter. But that's the information that I get. And now with this whole process, I've learned to pay attention to this emotion, then ask myself, what am I not okay with here? Why is this emotion showing up? And when I take the pause and take a breath and kind of distance myself from the immediate situation, then I have some space and some time to say, okay, how do I want to react to this? How do I want to solve the issue, right? In a way that is working within my values, working within my desires, actually, right? So that I think is one of the most important pieces to know about emotions, that they are really your friend. And that they like to be paid attention to. And it's really important to do that. And one way to do this is really breathe and feel your heart pumping and see how it moves all the blood and all the nourishment through your body, right?
Yeah, and how it develops before the brain.
Yes.
Many
absolutely.
cultures use the heart more actively as a thought center.
Yeah. There's a beautiful book by Hilary Jacobs Handel that is called It's Not Always Depression, that talks exactly about this. It tells you that core emotions actually come first, then your body starts reacting because the core emotion triggers this, and then your head is actually the last. So it's that's why I say emotions actually are the first center of wisdom.
Yeah, they can tell us things, what's going on, before our head knows it.
And emotion, that's another thing I think a misconception we often have. We believe that we can manage emotions. We actually can't. Emotions is really core to us and really, really essential to us. That's why we can't, they are so fast, we can't control them and we can't manage them, but we can determine how we want to react with them. Because I mean, when I'm angry at my boss and screaming at my kids, that's not the right reaction for my anger. Right? But when I take a step back and think and breathe, and think, what do I really want to negotiate with my boss about? Then I kind of deal with my anger in an appropriate way.
Well, it's so interesting that the culture has developed to keep emotions hidden at work, to
Yes.
just be yes people, like you said.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
and that is, it brings a type of violence back into the home, because you with the people you most trust and are feel closest to, you can let loose with,
Yeah.
and so it's misdirected
Yeah. But
energy
that's
there.
what we've learned very early on, particularly with things like anger, because they can be, anger is a very fiery emotion, right? It's, for me at least, it's very, very dominant when it shows up, or it can be, right? And there's a lot of energy that you create in that moment, and that energy needs to go somewhere. But what we've learned is to suppress this energy, which actually leads to physical symptoms in the long run. That's proven by now. Anger actually can lead to depression. And so that's something to understand. It is much, much better to acknowledge your emotions, to learn about your emotions and know what they want to tell you, and then move forward and use them in an appropriate way, and not the way we've learned to suppress them.
And is it like, do you see, what kind of organizations and companies do you see? I mean, are they the most cutting edge that are really, really moving into these new concepts of how people should be at work? Or,
I So I'm coming from the tech world, right? And they do believe a bit more on the mind still. But I do know that, particularly with the mindfulness movement, there is at least the more attention to the body. And Carla McLaren just got a new book out, The Power of Emotions at Work, which I haven't fully read yet, but it's very, very promising. So that's where companies start slowly acknowledging how important these emotions are, and how important these they call it, not, they do not call it emotion, they call it soft skills, right? So that's what we need to kind of know about this. And the moment they start a bit more paying attention to this, and that's what I see when I do my trainings there, is the moment things shift in the team, the moment the psychological safety is there. Because you can't build psychological safety based on metrics and based on, let's figure out how we reach the goals. There's so much glue in there that you need to bring forward. And that's what emotion is all about. Emotion is an absolute connector, connecting the dots, connecting the people, connecting for outcome. And that's, I think, what companies need to acknowledge much further. Esther Perel actually also talks about this in her podcast, How's Work, where you can listen to how these things really are the most important pieces to bring a company forward, or break a company, actually.
and how do you start working with companies? I mean, this is the work, some of the work you do.
Yeah.
How do you begin?
I sometimes, that's, I think, where the wisdom of saying no comes in. I pick them up where they have the pain points, right? And then I have to do the work in telling them, we are not talking about the 5 sentences you need to learn to say no, right? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, how do you understand why and what you really want to say no to? And what are the costs and the benefits of this? And because not paying attention to your emotions has a cost, right? A long run cost. It does lead to things like burnout. When people are not seen and acknowledged for their work, and that's an emotional state, then they leave. Do you really want that? Or do you want to have a team that is actually happy at work, and has authority, autonomy, and all these things, and can bring themselves forward in a way that is healthy? Because that's a part of your health. It's not just a thing that you do on the side. As I said, you can't manage emotions. So that's something to understand and know here. And hopefully companies will slowly but surely incorporate this more. It's my biggest goal.
I love
And
that goal. It's a really huge gift to the world to be doing the work you're doing.
yeah. So, and that still means we will go to the head, because the head is important too. And for the head, I choose a circle. I mean, that's kind of a given, right? So you can put a circle on top of this to symbolize the head. And the circle is actually one of the 5 universal symbols. The heart, interestingly, is not, but the triangle, the circle, the cross, the spiral, and I forgot, and the square are actually 5 universal symbols that are used across cultures to symbolize many, many different things. And the circle is the most perfect symbol in a way, and also always stands for something that is it's whole, right? It's the whole piece.
Yeah.
And the interesting piece about the head, or when we are kind of being with the head in this kind of practice, is to really start paying attention to what is the worry loop that we might have in our head. What are the voices that we hear constantly? What are the voices the sentences we hear when we shy away of doing something? Because they are very often, particularly in a moment of stress, in a moment of relaxation, they are different. But because we do this often or the idea is to do this in a moment of stress, right? In a moment of stress, we actually have a lot of worries and anxiety going through our heads. We have a lot of inner critics, old stories that we've learned, old beliefs and old ideas that have been brought because the way we grew up, because of our culture. And while you're kind of circling the head and be with the head, I want you to consider, what are these worries that are showing up for you consistently, right? And just pay attention to them. Again, it's not about why are they there and doing the whole kind of deep dive there, but it's really paying attention to what is showing up right now. When I think about a certain situation where I feel under pressure, what is coming to my mind? And then that's why coaching sometimes takes so long. But in the following kind of steps, you will start thinking about, is that really true? Right? Is that it's a brilliant question to ask your thoughts when you have calmed down, when you have been with them, when you have acknowledged them. Is that story really true? Is my worry that I might not be promoted when I say no to this really true? And if so, how can I navigate this and still say no? Because there's always the part where you can negotiate a few things. But in order to negotiate a few things, you need to know what you want. And also you need to know what the position of the other person is. So you actually what you want to do by being within this headspace is you actually want to clear your mind so that there's space for new ideas, that there's space for creativity, that there's space for informing yourself is what is my counterpart wanting from me.
It's so interesting because just doing the loop, you feel like the hamster wheel, the thoughts going round and round. Like when something comes up that really like shocks us or something, we're like, we go in this thought loop. Like we cannot think about it. It's hard to get it's easy to be distracted and not be able to do anything else because we're looping around, looping around, looping around. It's so, like you lose your keys or something and you just like, I gotta find my keys. I gotta find my keys. Or the other day I lost my phone. I gotta find my phone. I gotta find my phone. I gotta find my phone. It was just like, what is this day all about? Like, how do you kick yourself out of those thought loops?
And here's the thing, right? So what you can do, because you're putting this on paper, you actually go out of the circle from the head and you go back into your heart and you go back into your infinity symbol and you kind of connect all of them. You really move through the whole piece. And if you have, let's say, a lot of anger or a lot of energy in there, do a complete scratching. This is just a piece of paper with some kind of drawing. You can really kind of scratch everything out and get really angry with that piece of paper if that's what feels right? So there's no right thing to do it.
I feel it's a totally somatically different thing to move from this to then a heart to a infinity symbol. That is like an interesting practice.
Yeah. And you also can expand on it, right? You do not need to stay in the very first line. Very often what I see when I go through this, I suddenly get bigger in certain things. I get out of this, this triangle, right? I kind of, how do you say, it's kind of like the triangle is exploding in a way. So because I crashed the boundaries, right? With my painting. And what I would love to see, if somebody who's seeing this and listening to this is doing this in watercolor or in acrylics, and what it looks like when they do this and what comes out of it. Because when you go through the whole process, it is very, very possible that you end up with something very different than what I showed you earlier. And that's okay, that's perfect. You do what you need to do. There's no rhyme or reason. Just because I gave you a very neat little idea doesn't mean you need to stay in that form.
Yeah. So I understand you do a lot of this kind of art. You actually are an artist too. You have your own wearable art and art business as well that you've created. You're going to have an art show next year.
That's the plan. I need to do a few new pieces, and this might be one of them. Currently, I'm in with Whitney Freya is offering a tarot painting process, which I love. And I've been halfway through because you do a bit of painting every day as a meditation. And I have no idea where I will end up with this. I might not do what everybody else does. That's okay, because it's my meditation, it's my process. But that's how I actually paint. I paint or draw or doodle to kind of deal with things. So that's why I can't even tell you what I will be showing. It may be something different than I showed last time. But it's a process for me to sing, to be with myself, to deal with overwhelm.
And did you start being more artistically engaged after you?
Yes. I actually started, I think, in 2017. Until then, I believed I'm not creative. Although I always I was the crafty person in the family, and my sister was the artist in the family. And depending on how you define creativity, the crafty stuff is not creative, because I mean, making sourdough bread or baking or crocheting or so, it's not necessarily always considered crafty or artsy. And that's how I saw myself. And then I realized that I'm actually pretty good on canvas and on many other things, actually.
That sounds like a really big epiphany.
Yeah,
it must feel great in your body.
It does. That's how I started, actually. I had a canvas up, not knowing what I was doing there, and started dancing in front of that canvas with the paintbrush, or actually with the paint in my hands, because that's how I flow. That's my way. I like to paint with my hands. So that's how I do it. Do you mind showing me what you created?
Oh dear.
I'm just curious.
It's quite a
I love it. And that's exactly what I love about these kind of processes. I have several of them, but I really love what comes up. And actually, tell me a bit about how you feel right now in your body.
Well, I feel like it I was just relaxing. It felt like almost like here I am, like flowing with because especially since we started inside the triangle with the lambda-scape, with the infinity symbol, it just got that going, and it felt like you were talking and then I talked, and then and it just felt like a dialogue, and my body just, it's almost like I wasn't sitting in a rigid chair anymore. Part of my body was moving with the conversation. I can imagine the quality of conversations are so much better when people are maybe doodling. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is. It actually is, because you can focus a bit on what is going on for you and what information you really need to retrieve. You're actually retrieving the information that is really important for you, and not just all the clutter. Right. And that's, I think, why you actually remember 30% more of this, because you're not just hearing it, you're actually really experiencing it through your body. That's why there's a difference in when you even journal with your hand than when you journal on your laptop. There's a huge difference somatically.
Yeah. And there's something about doodling that it's like you make one thing and then another thing interacts off that
Yeah.
thing. And then you just start like it turns into another thing and then it like travels around the page and then it might come back to the, I don't know. It's like doodling is by nature a sort of wandering.
Yes, it creates curiosity as well, I think.
Yeah.
Because you sometimes can even go afterwards and think, what and why did I do this?
Yeah.
And I mean, I talked a teeny tiny bit about the symbolism here, but you actually can go very deep into the symbolism of what you're doodling, and kind of make sense. There is another practice that is called a soul scribble. And you kind of start just scribbling. And then at the end of the day, you can take a step back and then you look at it again and think, what do I see in here? And what shows up for me here? And sometimes it might be a bird, and then I actually encourage people to just look up what the meaning for bird might be, or what the how do you say, the spirit animal kind of information is for a bird, and how that applies to your life right now. It's what you do sometimes also with oracle or tarot cards. They are full of symbolism, and therefore meaning. And what you do with this, in my opinion at least, is you kind of create out of the story and what you're reading there what is important for you to receive right now. And it therefore can support you greatly.
Yeah. It's amazing what can come forward.
Yeah,
In a lot of ways, what we don't think is useful. A number of people on this series have talked about dreaming states and the creative process and how it like shows you things that you didn't realize were maybe present for you. It, you
yeah.
know.
That's why I'm such a huge proponent to put it on paper. You can destroy that paper afterwards. It doesn't really matter. But that's why the doodling is such an easy way in, and also something that you can let go of if it doesn't serve you. But for the moment it will serve you, because there is something that happened here, and it's something that is now visual for you, and you probably might keep it for a day or two, maybe longer. It depends. I know some people who did another thing. The uniquely you workshop that I do is actually a tree of life drawing, and I know some people who kept it for years, which is fascinating to me, and there's still meaning in it for them, although it's a moment in time that they kind of created there. Because that is, if you do this again, you will do something very different,
Mm-hmm.
even using the same symbols.
So, is there anything we haven't talked about that you think it's important for the audience to know?
I think I talked about my most my biggest passion. I think that's for me. I think we talked about everything that I'm very, very passionate about.
Mm. Well, it's so exciting, like bringing passion, but also bringing so much experience and so much skill. Um, I understand you have a gift you're offering the audience.
I have, I thought, but because we did this together now, I have an offer for you for a uniquely me process. It's not the tree of life drawing thing that I just talked about. It is actually a process where you learn a bit more about your natural gifts and recognize why people are drawn to you, and want to go to you and work with you and be with you, and all these things. And I think this process is so beautiful, and I use it with all my clients actually, because you also can use it when you go for a job interview or when you go for promotion to position yourself. I actually use the same process to tell the world about me and tell the world about who I am and why. When people say I'm a caring person, why do I care? Where's this coming from, right? So that it helps you creating these stories, and it also helps you to understand really much better what your natural gifts are, because we very often say, oh, I just do this, and they do not pay attention to, because it comes so natural, but it's actually one of your biggest gifts.
Hmm. Well, I have to say that your writings are really engaging and interesting, and you have read a lot of books and have a lot of interesting science mixed in, and just experiences that you've done. And so it's just really like a great education to read your musings that you have as well out there in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah. I really appreciate your leadership in moving from success on the outside to living with creativity and passion and making a difference in line with your values. What you've learned in that process has so much value. The ability to say no and embrace the process of healing with creativity and authentic reconnection. It's the journey of our time, and you're in a great position to help others cross the divide.
Yeah. Yeah, I do believe so. I think it's really what we have to do. And we are all creative.
So you can connect to Nicole's work and her free gift by clicking on the link next to this video. Do you want to just mention your website name so people know where to go as well?
It's my name. It's NicoleKleemann.com. Kleemann with a double N at the end. That's the most difficult thing in the English speaking world. But that's how you find me. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well if you prefer to just message or chat with me. And sometimes I show up on Instagram, but not that regularly.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank
It's
you.
been a great pleasure talking to you.
I
And
had
thank you all. Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with you. Thank you so much for being willing to go through this process with me.
Oh, anytime.
Yes.
So, thank you all for joining us on this somatic expedition. I hope you're inspired to learn the wisdom of saying no. Take bold steps toward work that reflects your core values. Reconnect to your creativity and tap into Nicole's work for resources and support. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.